Sota dragged his feet up the groaning stairwell of Phoenix Heights, an aging residential block long neglected by both tenants and maintenance crews. Every step felt like a rebellion against the crushing exhaustion weighing down his body. His eyelids burned, gritty and swollen, barely able to stay open. The air in the stairwell was thick, smelling of mildew, old cigarettes, and the slow decay of forgotten infrastructure. The fluorescent tubes overhead flickered erratically, buzzing with a sound that grated on his already frayed nerves, promising darkness rather than light. For 3 straight days, the final, most onerous leg of his delivery route had forced him into this desolate wing. His coworker, Mark, had quit abruptly. A nervous breakdown, they whispered, leaving Sota with the impossible workload of 2 men. He was running on fumes, adrenaline, and bitter black coffee, his focus fractured into useless shards. For 3 straight days, his deliveries had ended at the same address, apartment 7C, the final stop, the one that always felt colder than the rest of the hallway. Day 1, the silence and the smile. The first delivery was ordinary enough, a small, discreet parcel, likely expensive medication or artisanal imported tea, judging by the labels. When Sota knocked on the heavy wooden door of 7C, the sound was instantly swallowed by the dense, unresponsive material. There was no response, no shuffling feet, only the oppressive quiet of the abandoned corridor. He knocked again, louder this time. A slow, deliberate click followed, the sound of an old tumbler lock disengaging, echoing unnaturally loud in the otherwise dead space. The door opened just enough for him to see her. She occupied the narrow gap perfectly, not moving to open it wider, a silent barrier. She was unnervingly beautiful. Her skin was porcelain, flawless and pale, catching the weak spill of the hallway light and seeming to generate a faint internal luminescence. Her eyes were the most striking feature, deep and utterly dark, not reflecting the light, but absorbing it, like twin voids. She wore a simple, high-collared dress that seemed too formal for the setting. She signed the digital pad with a stylus that barely seemed to graze the screen. Her movements were stiff, almost rehearsed, like a marionette being carefully guided through a simple task. Sota noted the precision, the lack of human hesitation. Before Sota could offer his standard, exhausted greeting, "Sign here, ma'am, have a good evening," the door closed softly, sealing itself shut. The silence returned instantly, leaving behind the distinct, lingering scent of dry dust and something faintly, disturbingly metallic. Iron, perhaps. Sota blinked, shook his head against the fatigue, and descended the stairs, trying to forget the unsettling coolness emanating from apartment 7C. Day 2, the invitation. Exhaustion breeds carelessness. On the second day, Sota meant to be quick, clinical, in and out before the crushing weight of the coming night could settle. But curiosity, that dangerous byproduct of deprivation, gnawed at the edges of his professionalism. When she opened the door, there was a subtle difference in her demeanor, less guarded, perhaps more inviting. He forced a tired, professional smile onto his face. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Just a small delivery today." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with those deep, lightless eyes, as if performing a complex calculation of his suitability. Then she spoke. Her voice emerged low, melodic, and imbued with a strange, profound mournfulness, like the echo of a cello in an empty cathedral. "You look very tired," she observed, the statement not a question, but a diagnosis. "Please come inside. Have some tea. You look like you need to rest." Sota's rational mind screamed warnings. Every instinct honed by years of working late shifts screamed no, danger, leave. But the depletion was total. His body refused to cooperate with his will. He was too depleted to resist, and more alarmingly, he felt inexplicably drawn in by the quiet promise of rest she offered. The air outside was stale, but the air inside, he imagined, might be still. He crossed the threshold. The magnetic pull was instant and absolute. The apartment was immaculate, sterile. Every surface gleamed under the soft, indirect lighting. He registered high-backed chairs, heavy velvet drapery, and polished dark wood. Yet there were no personal items, no photographs, no scattered books, no keys on a dish, no signs of messy, living entropy. It felt less like a home and more like a carefully staged set for an ancient, unmoving portrait. The woman, whose name he still didn't know, moved toward a small, elegant table in the center of the room. She prepared the tea in absolute silence, her hands moving with unnatural grace. She used a silver service and served a pale, almost translucent green liquid in delicate porcelain cups. Sota sat stiffly on the edge of the velvet sofa, his heavy work boots feeling crude and intrusive against the plush carpet. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Then he heard it. Not the pipes, not the wind, but something inside the structure of the building itself. A faint, wet groan drifted from deeper within the apartment, past the drawing room, down a dark carpeted hallway that led away from the front door. It wasn't a sound of sharp pain, nor a cry of sudden alarm. It was a sound of profound, suffocated suffering, the sound of existence being slowly, painfully drawn out. "Did you hear that?" Sota whispered, his voice cracking from disuse and fear. He sat upright, the exhaustion momentarily beaten back by sheer terror. She poured the tea, her movements undisturbed. She placed his cup before him, the steam rising thin and ghostly. "Old pipes," she said smoothly, her voice never rising above that mournful register. "Please, drink. It will help." The tea looked innocent, but the moment it touched his lips, he knew it was wrong. It tasted bitter, mineralic, and profoundly wrong, like metallic earth mixed with stagnant pond water. Yet as the liquid slid down his throat, an odd, sharp sensation cut through his fatigue. It wasn't rest, it was a violent, unnatural surge, an unwelcome clarity that felt borrowed, not earned. Sota stood abruptly, gripping the edge of the sofa. "Thank you, but I can't stay. I have to finish my route." She didn't argue. She merely inclined her head, her dark eyes watching his retreat with unnerving patience. Sota hurried out, the door closing with the same soft, unsettling click. But as he stumbled down the stairs, the sound of that wet groan seemed imprinted not just in the air, but inside his own chest, vibrating in time with his frantic heartbeat. He drove home in a daze, feeling wired and hollowed out. Day 3, the revelation and the flight. By the third day, dread clung to Sota like a grave shroud. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to call in sick, to quit, to move to another city. But the schedule dictated 7C. The loop had begun, and exhaustion made him a predictable component. He arrived, smelling the familiar dust and the metallic tang clinging to the landing. He didn't wait for her to fully answer. He knew the routine, the slow lock, the narrow opening. As she reached out to take the package, Sota moved with a desperate, reckless speed born of pure, concentrated dread. He didn't attempt to push past her, he simply slipped by her, an act of pure, adrenaline-fueled violation of the small personal space she maintained. He moved toward the dark hallway leading into the body of the apartment. "What are you doing?" Her voice snapped, suddenly sharp, losing its melodic quality, becoming harsh, like grinding stones. The sound was laced with panic. Sota ignored her. He reached the first closed door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, not fully secured, and he pushed it open. The stench hit him like a physical blow, a tidal wave of horror. It was the smell of decay, ancient and wet, overlaid with a desperate chemical attempt at masking it, a sharp, biting disinfectant that couldn't quite conquer the rod. On the bed, beneath the pale light filtering from the hallway, lay a man. He was impossibly swollen, his body distended beyond human shape, the skin taut and ruptured with weeping, angry sores that wept fluid onto the decaying sheets. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and frozen open, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. White, thick foam bubbled sluggishly at his lips, evidence of a final, agonizing trauma, suggesting his body was trapped in the physical manifestation of an endless, silent seizure. Sota staggered back, gagging, the sight burning itself onto his retinas. This was the source of the groan. This was the horror she had hidden. He turned to flee, but she was instantly behind him. The woman, the specter, was no longer beautiful. Her flawless skin seemed stretched too thin, revealing a gray, desiccated quality beneath. Her mouth had twisted into an impossibly wide rictus grin, far wider than human musculature allowed, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous and too sharp. Her dark eyes were no longer voids. They burned with a deep, malevolent crimson. "You shouldn't have seen that," she whispered, the melody gone, replaced by a dry, hungry hiss. Sota didn't fight. He didn't scream. He simply ran, propelled by a terror so absolute it seemed to divorce his soul from his body. He passed through her as if she were nothing but a column of freezing smoke, a momentary resistance that left a sudden, profound chill in his core. He slammed the apartment door shut with a desperate effort that seemed to momentarily weaken the spectral barrier, and he ran down the groaning stairs, past the flickering lights, until his legs failed him entirely, collapsing onto the concrete floor of the delivery depot loading dock, gasping the relatively clean city air. The aftermath and the analysis. The next morning, Sota was summoned, not to be fired, but to face Mr. Nolan, his manager, whose face was set in a mask of profound irritation and confusion. 7C, Sota, we've had a formal complaint, a massive one. You allegedly attempted forced entry and assaulted a resident. They claimed you disrupted a very delicate situation. Nolan slammed a thin file onto his desk. "I'm dealing with this personally. We go back up there right now." Nolan was furious, demanding an explanation Sota couldn't give. They ascended together, Nolan muttering about insurance liabilities and the city housing authority. When they reached the landing, Nolan didn't hesitate. He used the master key, forcing the lock that Sota had slammed the day before. The door swung inward easily, unresisted. The reality that greeted them was a sharp, physical shock. The air was thick with decades of undisturbed dust.
Cobwebs, heavy and gray like funeral veils, draped every piece of furniture. The velvet sofa was rotten, the cushions collapsed into mounds of decayed stuffing. The dining table was coated in a fine layer of silt. 3 unopened parcels lay scattered on the floor where Sota had left them yesterday, untouched by human hands. The bedroom door was closed. Nolan kicked it open. The room was empty save for a rusted skeletal bed frame. The springs were snapped and coated in orange rust. There was no sign of a body, no fluids, no disinfectant smell, only the smell of extreme, ancient neglect. Nolan pulled a thin, yellowed police report from the file he carried. Listen to this, Sota. Apartment 7C, sealed by the city in 1998. A woman suffering from advanced, untreated paranoid schizophrenia poisoned her husband in that bed, then consumed a lethal dose of medication herself. The apartment was sealed immediately after forensics cleared the scene. It hasn't been legally occupied in over 25 years. There are no current residents. Nolan looked at Sota, his anger dissolving into something bordering on